You reach the point where nothing seems to fit anymore. The practices that used to calm you now irritate you. The affirmations sound hollow. Even the spiritual tools that once lit your path feel like relics from a different lifetime. It's not laziness, and it's not regression. It is the dissolution phase, the spiral stage where your identity begins to fall apart under the weight of its own evolution. What you're losing isn't purpose, it's the costume you wore to find it. For a while, identity served you. It gave you coordinates in a world that measures meaning by definition. You built a self so you could navigate safely. You said, I'm this kind of person. I like these things. I believe in this. Every declaration drew boundaries that made you feel real. But awakening keeps expanding your edges, and the structure that once felt solid starts to suffocate. You can't keep living inside labels that your awareness has outgrown. So the spiral begins the gentle breakdown. At first, it looks like failure. Your motivation drops. The things that used to bring joy don't. The ego panics because it interprets stillness as death. It whispers, what's wrong with me? Why can't I feel inspired? But this emptiness isn't punishment, it's recalibration. You're not losing alignment. You're shedding the scaffolding that kept your consciousness small enough to feel separate. When identity dissolves, the mind screams for control. It hunts for a new version of you to become a better mask to wear. But the spiral won't let you rebuild yet. It wants you to sit in the space between selves, the empty node. That's the 0 point of transformation. Every illusion you've built, every self-concept that brought temporary security, has to pass through that node. It's not a void, it's a reset field. It erases the residue of who you pretended to be, so the essence of who you are can finally surface unedited. This stage terrifies most people because it looks like meaninglessness. You lose drive, ambition, clarity. You stop wanting to manifest. You might even stop caring whether you're ascending. But what's really happening is that your inner architecture is being rewritten. The systems that kept you striving are collapsing so that being itself can become enough. The ego mistakes this stillness for annihilation. The soul recognizes it as integration. You'll notice how quiet everything becomes. Friends stop calling. Your spiritual community might feel distant. You start disappearing from conversations because there's nothing left to prove. You can't pretend to care about arguments that orbit the same illusions you just dismantled. It's not arrogance, it's resonance withdrawal. You're no longer addicted to being someone. You're learning to exist without narrative. Then the grief hits, because no one warns you that enlightenment comes with mourning. You grieve every identity you worked so hard to construct. The achiever, the healer, the believer, the rebel. Each one held a piece of your journey, and each one kept you safe until you didn't need it anymore. Letting them die feels like betrayal, but it's actually devotion. You're honoring them by releasing them. You might try to rebuild prematurely. The mind says, fine, if I'm not that version of me, then I'll be this new higher self instead. But the spiral doesn't negotiate. If you rebuild before the reset is complete, the structure will crumble again. You can't create a new identity out of the ashes of an old one. You have to let the fire finish. True transformation doesn't come from adding more light. It comes from allowing what no longer vibrates at truth to burn away. The danger in this phase is mistaking the void for failure. Society trains us to measure life by productivity and certainty. So when you stop doing and start dissolving, it feels like regression. But this is the most sacred pause you will ever take. The empty node is where the next resonance codes enter. They can transmit into a cluttered self. Stillness is not the absence of progress. It's the atmosphere where genuine evolution can finally breathe. You'll notice your emotions fluctuate wildly. One day you feel infinite, the next you can't get out of bed. That's the nervous system recalibrating to operate without the old identity scripts. You used to interpret your feelings through that identity's lens. Now you were learning to feel without interpretation. Every surge of sadness, every wave of apathy, every flash of anger is data leaving your field. Don't analyze it. Let it exit. Your only task is to stay honest enough not to rebuild illusions just to escape discomfort. If you're in this stage, you might find yourself saying things like, "I don't know who I am anymore," or "I can't find my purpose." That's the exact frequency of the empty node. It's not confusion, it's spaciousness forming. You're standing between cycles, where identity dissolves and essence reorganizes. The mind calls it nothingness, but the soul knows it as potential. Every time you resist defining yourself too soon, you expand the bandwidth for what your next self can hold. At some point, you'll stop fighting the emptiness and start listening to it. You'll realize it's not silent at all, and it's humming. Beneath the stillness, there's a subtle rhythm, like the heartbeat of a new reality forming. You can't rush it. You can only surrender to its timing. The spiral never punishes slowness. It reveres it. Each dissolution phase is unique to your resonance pattern, and the longer you resist, the longer it repeats. Eventually, acceptance dawns. You stop needing to understand. You start trusting the unraveling. You begin to sense that identity was never meant to be permanent. It was a tool, not a truth. And when you can finally hold that awareness without panic, something miraculous happens. Clarity returns. But it doesn't come as a lightning bolt or revelation. It comes as quiet knowing, as an inner nod. You realize you were never lost, you were being rewritten. That's the essence of the empty node. It's not erasure, it's purification. It strips away false certainty so you can experience existence directly. The mind calls it ego death. The spiral calls it soul expansion. You are not disappearing. You're becoming transparent enough for truth to shine through. When nothing works anymore, it's because the self that needed things to work is dissolving. The system is rebooting from identity to essence, from personality to presence. You are not falling apart, you are falling open. The structures collapse so the spiral can breathe through you unhindered. Let it. At some point, the emptiness stops feeling like an enemy. You wake up and realize you no longer need the next version of yourself to arrive. You've stopped searching for an improved identity to replace the one that collapsed. You begin to understand what the spiral has been teaching you the entire time. That identity was never who you were. It was simply how you temporarily translated infinity into form. When that form breaks, infinity doesn't vanish. It just stops pretending to be small. This is the rebirth after the void. The energy that once powered your false roles is now free, and it doesn't rush to occupy new shapes. It moves slowly, curiously, like light exploring open space. You find yourself drawn to things that feel gentle, unforced, or absurdly simple. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Walking outside feels like communion. You begin to value silence as much as clarity. You don't need to declare who you are anymore because your beingness speaks for you. That's the irony. The less you try to define yourself, the more coherent your energy becomes. You stop scattering resonance into countless identities and start radiating as one integrated field. People notice the difference. They say you seem peaceful, but it's not the peace of passivity. It's the peace of no longer fighting your own unfolding. You're not guarding a self-concept anymore, so your energy is clean. You don't need to defend it, explain it, or justify it. From this still point, creativity begins to stir again, but not from ambition. It rises like a tide, not like a to-do list. You create because the energy wants to move, not because you're chasing meaning. This is how true purpose reveals itself. Not as an identity you adopt, but as a natural expression of resonance. The ego used to say, "I need a purpose to feel real." The soul now says, "I am real and therefore I express." The direction flips completely. You're no longer searching for alignment. You are alignment exploring itself. Yet even in this piece, a subtle fear can linger, the fear of disappearing completely. After all, you've spent a lifetime being told that identity equals existence. To let go of identity feels like letting go of life. But in truth, what's dying isn't life, it's separation. The illusion of being a single fixed self dissolves, and what remains is connection, direct, unfiltered participation in everything. You begin to sense that every person, every sound, every breath is part of the same unfolding. You were never meant to be a stable noun. You were meant to be a verb, alive, fluid, constantly becoming. This is the state of fluid resonance. It's not detachment or numbness, it's responsiveness. You can move between roles without being trapped by them. You can say I without believing it's a boundary. You can love without possession, grieve without collapse, teach without hierarchy. You no longer need to be the healer, the empath, or the awakened one. You simply are, and in that being, healing happens naturally. People often ask, how do I rebuild after identity death? But the spiral doesn't rebuild in the old sense. It reconfigures. The structures that emerge now are dynamic, not rigid. You might find yourself drawn to new work, new relationships, new environments, but none of them define you. They reflect you. You interact with life as a mirror instead of a maze. When something no longer resonates, you don't force it, you pivot. When something calls to you, you respond without overthinking. Your compass is no longer logic or habit, it's frequency. This is also when your sensitivity becomes a superpower, rather than a burden. Before dissolution, sensitivity felt like fragility because you identified with what you absorbed. Now you feel everything but carry nothing. You've learned to let energy pass through instead of stick to you. You don't protect your energy anymore. You circulate it. You become the flow instead of the dam. And because you're not resisting, your presence itself becomes healing for others. Not through effort, but through coherence. As your resonance stabilizes, you'll notice that meaning returns in a quieter form. It's no longer attached to outcome. You don't need to make something happen to feel valuable. Existence itself feels significant again. You can look at a tree and feel a kind of wordless understanding that it doesn't need a brand, a mission statement, or a 5-year plan to justify being alive. It just grows because growth is what it is. That's you now. You don't live for a reason. You live as a rhythm. Eventually, this fluid identity becomes your new normal. You no longer chase transcendence and you embody it. The old spiritual goals of perfection, enlightenment, or ascension start to feel like old software written for smaller systems. You realize you were never meant to escape humanity. You were meant to refine it, to bring consciousness into the flesh rather than flee it. Dissolution wasn't an exit, it was a deepening. You didn't dissolve to disappear, you dissolved to expand your capacity to stay. And this staying, this ability to be fully present without clinging to form, is what the spiral calls mastery. Not the mastery of control, but the mastery of trust. You can move through chaos without trying to fix it, through silence without trying to fill it. You've stopped worshiping certainty because you've seen that all certainty is temporary. You'd rather be real than right. You'd rather be awake than comfortable. You'd rather be fluid than finished. It's here that gratitude re-enters not as a practice, but as a state of being. You start thanking the collapse for saving you from stagnation. You see how every breakdown was actually an act of grace. The spiral pulling false identities off you so your true essence could breathe. You realize that when nothing works anymore was never a curse. It was an invitation to live beyond dependency. It was life's way of saying, stop functioning and start feeling. Stop constructing and start existing. And you do. You start existing again, simply, fully, wordlessly. You stop performing enlightenment and start living it in the smallest acts. Resting without guilt, listening without reacting, creating without comparing. You don't crave the next upgrade of self because you understand now that beingness is infinite. The spiral isn't a ladder you climb, it's a current you remember how to flow with. Soon people around you start to sense the difference. They can't quite describe it, but they feel calmer in your presence. Your stillness begins to teach without words. This is how the spiral transmits through you now, not as information, but as atmosphere. You don't preach clarity, you emanate it. The emptiness that once terrified you has become the quiet space through which others remember their own light. So if you're standing in that space right now, if nothing works, if every identity feels foreign, if silence has swallowed your certainty, know this, you're not disappearing. You're dissolving the boundaries between yourself and life. The emptiness you feel is not absence, it's room. Room for the next expression of truth to enter. You're not in the void, you are the void, aware of itself, pregnant with potential. And when you finally stop resisting, when you stop trying to rush your reassembly, life begins to pulse again, soft, steady, familiar. You realize the spiral never left you in the dark. It simply turned off the light so you could discover your own glow. And that glow, it doesn't belong to any identity. It is not the awakened one, or the teacher, or the healed. It's what remains when everything else has dissolved. It's the hum beneath your name, it's the pulse of pure being. And it has always been there, waiting patiently for you to stop performing long enough to feel it. When nothing works anymore, remember, the spiral isn't breaking you. It's unmaking what was never truly you. So what's real can finally take its first full breath.